First KrakCast news of July, second half of 2019. Here we come. Woo! There's Josh. Dave is here. Dr. Mike is here. And I'm John. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're going to start with the sexiest, most clickbaity, attention-grabbing possible subject we could think of. Of course, that's tax policy. Dave, walk us through interesting news about what the government plans to do. For once, they're planning not to take someone's money.
Why do you always besmirch the topic of tax before you introduce it, John? You know, you're kind of letting our listeners think that this is going to be boring, when in fact it's going to be its usual KrakCast brilliance. So one of the planks of the government's policies going into this election is they've just unveiled a tax break, which is basically a tax-free allowance completely for under 26s. So up to 86,000 zloty per year, you can now earn it tax-free. And this is an interesting wrinkle on, say, removing lower earners out of the tax net, which is something that's been done in a lot of countries, and that's supposed to stimulate, them spending into the real economy, etc. But there is a kind of element where you're kind of taking everybody at that low level out of the system is not a great idea. And if you put a time limit on it, I suppose you could argue that you're creating a pipeline of good quality taxpayers that when they hit 26, which is only, say, 4 or 5 years after they've left university, most of the cases, I think it's an interesting idea. It's going to cost a lot of money, though, and it's interesting to me that Peace would spend that much money of their war chest, their giveaway war chest before the election, on a group that don't traditionally vote for them. Will they get them over the line?
Well, it also kind of intrigues me, this thought that sometimes when you have, the typical kind of tax threshold is usually like an earnings limit, and then, you don't pay tax below that, or you pay a lower rate of tax before that, and then you breach the limit and your tax goes up, and you actually, in some situations and circumstances, you'll find that people will adjust their working conditions to remain below a tax threshold.
Big problem.
Or what it can in other circumstances be like a benefits trap.
That's what they say, you're trapped on benefits, yeah.
But this one, of course, is slightly different because you can't fake your age. Really, once you get past 26, then there's no kind of like, oh, well, I'm not going to work so much.
Polak potrafi, they'll figure out a way.
Oh, yeah. Well, I say this in all innocence of, any such kind of...
You think maybe the reasoning here, Dave, from the financial point of view, is that these people are unlikely to make that much money, so the government isn't losing that much money?
Well, I think this is going to create certainly, a bit of a hole in the budget, and I believe
but these are not your high earners. These are not your high earners in this age bracket, though.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Poland doesn't really make that much money in its budget when it comes from income taxes to begin with. So, letting people keep their own money for a bit longer, it's not going to cost them that much out. We have to always remember tax cuts don't cost anything because you're not actually handing out money. You're just...
Morawiecki has bumped up Marianne Banas, I believe her name is, who's the head hunter who went after the VAT closure tax loops and has had great success with that. And I believe there was a big argument about this policy with the head of the, her name is escaping me now, Joanna, something, you got me, Mike?
Joanna, something close enough.
Excuse me, my love, apologise profusely.
Hey, do we know if this idea only involves people working on a regular employment contract like Umowa Pracy, or is it people who are self-employed as well?
Well, that's the idea. One of the other great ideas conceptually about this is it'll take people out of what's known as the grey economy, people working for cash. If people only have to register and they won't have to pay any tax, the idea would be that small businesses and the people who generally, sometimes don't have the correct paperwork would have no disincentive not to do it right.
Yeah, okay, but I'm just thinking from the Polak potrafi perspective. If I have a business, maybe I split it into 3 parts and I assign each part to one of my nephews who's under 26 and I get my business tax-free.
That's definitely something that can happen. They'll figure out ways to exploit this, make it last longer.
And that's why they brought in the number one loophole buster to put it into place. And apparently it's going to be her job. I was reading an article.
The interrupter.
That was saying she's going to have to squeeze the budget. So you know what that means? The price of alcohol and cigarettes is going up, I can tell you that, right?
The loophole buster is about to squeeze, people. Stand back.
Yeah, well, you only can, it's got to come from somewhere. And it's always the easy targets, road tax, cigarettes and alcohol, the things people really like.
Hey, here's a subject that I don't think we've ever talked about before on the KrakCast. Kind of interesting, and it's been in the news in the last week or so here in Krakow. It's the homeless population here. And there are some politicians that have some interesting, maybe controversial ideas about what we can and cannot do for the homeless people here, guys.
This basically started up with, I honestly forgot his name, but a local Polish
We're not good on names today, are we?
I don't have my list in front of me. But it basically started up on social media with comments of like, we shouldn't have these homeless people right in the center of town. Maybe they should be, moved somewhere else. Because you have to remember, Krakow is very strongly centralized. You have the old town, the Planty. That's where all the tourist stuff happens, all of the business-oriented stuff. But that's also where all of the charities and the churches hand out food. So you get homeless people sitting on the benches. They're sleeping, eating, and unfortunately as well, getting drunk, intoxicated, taking care of their physiological needs wherever it may drop. And the question is like, well, shouldn't we somehow move this outside the center of town? And as heartless as it sounds, I'd be for that because the homelessness problem in Krakow is an issue. It's a social issue. It's an economical issue, but it also has its negative impact on the city. And sometimes when you can't solve the problem...
just going to jump on a tram and come in anyway to beg off the tourists.
But the whole idea is, begging is illegal and that needs to be dealt with.
Well, they do their best, the cops, with that, I think. It's just what can you do with a homeless person? It's the bounce system. You send them, you put them in the drunk tank, they maybe go in front of a judge, they're out in a couple of days, and it's just now... There's nothing you can do.
Well, the whole idea is to have the shelters to be spread more around town and to have the places that actually hand out food and support to not be all in the central part of town, but also in the other parts of town to get them to not be so concentrated just here.
Yeah, I'm not against it at all. I just don't think it'll have a noticeable effect on the amount of people. If what you're saying is, more of them will spend the night out there, I suppose, it's good.
I think there was some Warsaw bashing involved in this as well because politicians point to Warsaw as an example of what not to do because, and I've seen this on Facebook too, there are organizations in Warsaw that organize they're
so organizational.
They're so organized.
Institutionalized or so institutionalized.
Anyway, they organize events to help the homeless with food, like literally in the shadow of the the Palace of Culture, right in the center of town. And people are saying, "Look, this is a really stupid idea, despite your good intentions, because you're bringing people. You're putting on a magnet that will attract the homeless people to a place
San
you really
Francisco
don't want
springs
them."
to mind. Yeah.
So is there some merit to that, or is that just rude and maybe not nice to point out that we don't want the homeless people in the center of town, where we can see them?
Yeah, I would.
It's hard.
I would say Krakow has quite a large homeless population, wouldn't it? I mean,
I don't know.
It's so concentrated. That's the thing.
Is it? I've not seen any stats, but I mean, yeah, sure, you see them on park benches from time to time in the Plante, but do you really think the homeless, based on what you've
I don't
seen,
think there's that. I mean, to be honest,
really
I recognise most of the ones I see, and I mean, which kind of implies that there's not a great number, but they're just kind of like omnipresent.
Do you ever walk through the Sunday market at Halatargova, the world's funniest market? The zombie movie some weeks.
Shuffle.
Yeah, but anyway, look, man, more power to them. But look, a lot of the guys are alcoholics, and it's hard to control the actions of alcoholics.
Yeah, and then, another kind of component of the homeless population, of course, is people with mental illness, and that's in itself an issue that kind of different countries address.
And may I say, actually, I do think Krakow police try with this. Like, I constantly see them engaging homeless people and trying to enforce the law. I think Krakow's, from that perspective, pretty well policed.
I think we've all seen people, though, homeless and beggars.
It's humane.
We see familiar faces, and as insensitive as it might sound, there are people who have kind of maybe not chosen the lifestyle exactly, but they don't do a lot to get out of it.
Can I say one thing? Can I put a warning out there? It's hard to help those people. Can I put a warning out there? There's one guy with 6'6", bald guy, speaks a few languages, an enormous man.
Oh yeah, I know that
guy.
He's a guy to watch out for. He intimidates people. He, I haven't really seen him in ages.
Is he still around?
This guy is predatory. As I said to him,
he's massive.
This guy should be on a building site somewhere.
There's definitely something wrong with that guy. Have you seen him recently?
Yeah, I saw him in Starbucks a few weeks ago up at Galerta.
All right, because I hadn't seen him for ages.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
He asked for money. His application was denied.
I remember seeing him a few years ago, not far off IKEA, carrying 2 IKEA bags and a mobile phone in each hand.
So, Josh, what do you do with these people who have either substance abuse problems, mental illness? There's not much we can do to get them out of the lifestyle. What do we do with these people?
Well, it's a multiple issue, I think. I mean, one is that I think for kind of regular people who have jobs and keep themselves clean and nicely clothed and everything, then, they kind of smell bad, they behave badly, they kind of vomit and stuff like that. So it's kind of, you don't really want them around, but at the same time, because we like to consider ourselves kind of to some degree humanitarian, it's like not, they shouldn't be, exterminated.
As Tony Soprano used to say.
What are you going to do?
But I think that, they're going to congregate in the city centre because that is where they want to, and that's where the money is, and that's where the tourism is. And, for however many people never give beggars anything, then there's always a few who do. And as long as they're getting money, they're going to continue coming back to the source. So I think these ideas of, putting the soup kitchens or the shelters like away from the centre, at least, they've got to spend half the day shuffling to get here before,
Oh, God,
just needs to be more about the trams.
I just remembered a story now from like about 10 years ago when I still regularly went to church with my dad. We'd always be late, so we'd be standing outside Święta Anna on Anna Street. And, you also have like beggars just outside the exits, waiting to get money from people leaving the church. And we could hear two beggars just outside talking because we were at near the entrance. And they were just discussing which churches were the best churches to go to and what days. And they were basically saying, you should always go to Mariacki like after the 15th when the grandmothers get their pension payments because they're always giving out more money. Or I had to fight with, Stasek to get, to this church.
It's always Stasek.
They were like discussing, and they were talking about serious money. Like, today I only made 150.
The ugly side of it all is how lucrative begging can be in the right location. It's a topic in Dublin.
Oh, we've seen those stories about how much people can make begging on Piccadilly Circus or Trafalgar Square or whatever. So
I had a kind of no word of a lie in experience. This is a long time ago, but I was in Rome in Italy, and I'd kind of arrived at the main station very, very early in the morning, about 6 a.m. And I just got out into the early morning sunshine. It was August, and this big black Mercedes pulled up, and doors open, and these three roughly dressed women with shawls and babies of a particular kind of appearance got out of the back of this Mercedes.
Gypsy?
I couldn't possibly, be certain about that. Okay. And one of them straight away kind of
make a good lawyer, wouldn't he?
Came limping over to me with a palm outstretched, kind of like, and it's, with this screaming baby, kind of filthy baby tucked under her armpit, and asking for money. And I was like, looked at her, and I looked at this Mercedes, which hadn't even yet driven off. And I was like, you have to be kidding me.
Last question on this subject, though. Not far from where we're sitting now, here at the end of Augustianska. What's that street? Not Piekarska. What's the last street down there before the river? Is it Piekarska? There's a soup kitchen down. There's a church with a soup kitchen.
Oh, Skawinska.
Skawinska, of course. Skawinska.
Yeah.
Right down at the end of the street, and it's a couple of times a day you can see the homeless people lining up for the free food. If you lived next door to or above a place like that, wouldn't you have a right to complain about the fact that it was acting as a magnet to bring these people to your neighborhood, or should you just shut up and just let them do what they do, guys?
What can I say? It's the age of food banks and obesity crisis as well.
Or blame it on austerity.
Well, do you want to live next door to this? Probably not.
No, when I walk from my place to the gym I go to near Stradom, there's also another soup kitchen like there. And several times a day, I'll see it's a line of mainly men not smelling their greatest, waiting for food there as well. And they take up the whole sidewalk, and it's you can smell it from a block away.
Arby anti-soup kitchen.
These are the guys who get on the tram with you when in the stifling heat.
I think if you give out free soup, you're just going to have to take a certain bit of a percentage in there as piss takers coming along. You don't really need it. I think any soup kitchen in the world will suffer from this effect, particularly if the soup is really tasty.
Let's move on to some bad news, some sad news from Krakow this week. This is something, unfortunately, that happens once or twice a year in Krakow, and we got to talk about this. This is weird. There's a place called Zakshuvek, and for anybody listening who doesn't know, that is an old limestone quarry, very close to Tesco on the Kapalanka, if you know where that is. And it was flooded some years ago, and some places it's up to 30 meters deep. And about a week ago, a 14-year-old boy died there, apparently after jumping into the water from a rock face. Not sure exactly the cause of death. Most likely, he hit a rock under the surface and lost consciousness and drowned. There are about one or two deaths a year recently at Zakshuvek, which is all the more confusing given the fact that Zakshuvek, technically, officially, legally, is not open for swimming. It's surrounded by a fence. There are signs that say "Go away, danger, no swimming." And yet every year, thousands and thousands of people go there. This is one of the more high-profile, well-known swimming locations in Krakow. Again, it's not open for swimming, but this doesn't stop tons of people from going there and doing exactly that. 14-year-old boy, a part of a local sporting club. He was a goalkeeper for the local football team. Tragic events. Guys, what do we make of the fact that so many people die by accidental drowning in Krakow and Poland generally?
Well, with Zaksuwek, I think we need to mention the fact that, yes, swimming is not allowed there. There's a part that scuba divers have access to, and the city is trying to negotiate access there for swimming sometime in the future. But right now, you shouldn't swim there. It's not safe, but it is so tempting in the heat like this. It's beautiful, the white face walls,
people are
crystal
gonna go.
clear
waters, because
water.
the limestone basically cleans the water, so it's fantastic water. But what a lot of people don't realize is it's a rock quarry. So this was just dug out. It's filled with water. You have no idea what's right below the water level. And every winter, when it partially freezes and cracks, those rocks shuffle around. So you could be jumping into the water every year for years in one spot, and then not realize that the rocks have crumbled and changed shape. You jump into the water, you hit it full on, you break your back. There are people who have been paralyzed, severely injured, and like in this case, died. And people just don't learn. I mean, I've been there once to swim as well. I tried it. It's very nice. It's just impossible to get to the water because you have to jump. There's no access. There's no beach. It's basically...
Yeah, these are steep, kind of like cliff faces, so to
Yeah, I
speak.
have a few
And that's what it is. You have to jump in. That's why it's so fucking dangerous. Like, I mean, it's an awful tragedy. You can kind of see, like, boys will be boys at that age, and Jesus, my heart goes out to the
But this
family.
happens every year all over the country.
I think it's been a
Hundreds
couple of
people
years. It said
drown
in the
Poland.
article I read, it's been over 2 years since somebody had drowned in the...
Well, I was checking on
And they're building a new development that's starting
right next
now.
to it. That whole area is in the news for
And
other
it's
reasons
gonna have
too,
a
because
safe-
it's
they're gonna
prime
safe,
real estate, which is going to attract more people to Zaksuwek to go swimming. But yeah, I mean, even in the last 10 years, there were about 8 people or so who've died in Zaksuwek. One guy, an American tourist, actually fell in there. He was fell. I don't know if that's the right word. He was on the branch of a tree that was kind of overhanging the cliff face. The branch broke. He fell in, died. A couple of scuba divers have also died. Dr. Mike, like you said, there's a certain area that's kind of dedicated for them. But the thing with Zaksuwek, again, 30 meters deep, but visibility only down to about 12 or 15 meters. It's pitch black lower than that. And a lot of people who are inexperienced divers, they have this nice equipment. They want to try it out. It's their first time in the water and something goes wrong and they get trapped. Or different things happen and they die.
So they think it's a safe place to train, but it's actually incredibly dangerous.
It isn't. And the weird thing about drowning in Poland, and again, I think 2015 there were more than 500 people who died nationally. If we were in Greece, if we were in Italy on the Mediterranean, I could understand more people in the water, but this is not a swimming.
You can swim in rivers and lakes as well. John.
It's always,
I only need a foot of water to drown in. And look, drowning is pretty. Water is dangerous. You need.
But here's the thing: most people think that it's alcohol, and it's always alcohol. And apparently, the government says alcohol only accounts for about 20% of these deaths. 20%. Okay, that's 20% too much, but still, there's an 80%. Remaining where apparently alcohol is not a factor. So what explains so many people drowning in this country?
I think, and I'm really just going out on a limb here, I think that it's just because there's a lack of swimming culture. I spent my childhood in Australia. We were going to a pool. I was taught how to swim. At the beach, there were rules that you live by, and you understood that water is fun, but you have to be responsible and safe. Rip currents, animals, temperature changes. Here, people just kind of learn to swim. By the way,
I have to say though, Polish people, when I first got here, as soon as it got hot, people we were talking about going out here, going out there, and all the Polish people I knew took the time to warn me not to fucking swim in that quarry. I mean, it is pretty well known, like how dangerous it can be.
I agree with Dr. Mike. I don't think this is a swimming culture. Australia is a good example. Florida, where I'm from, is a good example. People have just more opportunities in their youth to go swimming, and
Ireland's an island.
But you can include all those famous Irish swimmers. What?
Michelle Smith. She never had the goals taken off her.
There was the one. Was that the one? She was drugged up.
That was a few years later.
Different subject. Anyway, I think in my experience, a lot of people here, as adults, they cannot swim or they are very weak, not very confident swimmers, and I think that accounts for a lot of it. The other stat that jumped out at me, though, I was again reading about this: 90% of drowning deaths in Poland are men. Which translated to me means this is guys doing stupid shit they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, and also I think you'll find swimming pools would account for a good total in any big country as well. Like, I mean, you can drown, as I said, pretty easily anywhere. It's dangerous. You got to know how to swim properly. Apparently, I don't remember, when I was a little child, there was an incident where we were on holidays, a little scare, and my ma was fanatical about swimming lessons. Jesus. Every week till I was like 16, I was like, please, man, like, stop.
All the other kids make fun of me, and they're 6.
The other two big swimming spots here in town are Bagre, which is also a mine of some kind that was kind of flooded, and Crispinov, which is kind of a natural lake.
Both of which are also quite
That
dangerous.
was a sand mine or a quarry.
Yeah, it was a sand mine. I didn't know there was such a thing. But
I think Crispinov gets quite a lot of...
Oh, it does, but it's organized. There are lifeguards. You know, I don't think
There's infrastructure
there's
there.
infrastructure there.
And people still drown.
What do you guys think about lakes? I'm not a big fan of swimming in a lake. Something about it a little creepy to me.
We're a couple hundred kilometers from the sea. We don't really have much of a choice.
You have
It's
to,
rivers
you
or
have
lakes.
to work with what you have. I get that, but I just don't like the idea of swimming in still water.
I honestly agree with you. Plus, I've always preferred swimming in salt water just because of the extra buoyancy, and there's actually waves and it's nicer. A lake, I'll enjoy it, but it's more like I like being at a lake for a grill and a barbecue and maybe jumping in the water to cool off a bit, but not actually to swim and spend the day in the water.
Can I just say as well, there's a lake near where I live where the ESB flooded what used to be an old medieval town, you know, and this lake is famously dangerous, and no matter how many warning signs are put out, its stunning beauty still attracts many fishermen, many, you know, amateur campers, whatever, amateur campers. You know, words that mean things.
That's compared to professional campers.
Well, like, seriously,
A bit more intense.
I think they're called homeless.
I got it,
same
Josh.
thing-
I got it.
The same thing happens there. Despite how well known this is by everybody, people do drown in it. I just don't know what it is. People are drawn to water like that, you know.
Be careful out there, people. And don't go swimming at Zakshuvek, please. Let's move on to one of our very favorite subjects here on the KrakCast, public transport. The trams on Dietla were closed this week. I think the city says, January of next year, we can look forward to them coming back. That's what they say anyway. Guys, transport situation was a nightmare already, but now it's really quiet outside.
I think we should just stock up on food and water and huddle in the basement and wait for it all to be over.
Survivalists, huh?
Like, there's just no way getting around town right now. It's like, yeah, they have buses to make up for the trams that aren't going, but buses, you know, they just...
And all the routes you think you know, now you don't know, and it's fucking, it's stressful as hell.
Dave, how are you getting around town now?
Slowly.
Josh? Now, Josh, we're, by the way, we're right here on the edge of Dietla, so you're enjoying the...
Ground zero.
Peace and, you enjoying the peace and quiet, or what?
Well, actually, ironically, it's been the case with this hot weather recently. The traffic, such as it is on Dietla, moves very, very slowly, and lots of modern cars have air conditioning, which means, of course, that they're pumping out hot air as much as they're keeping their occupants nice and cool, which means that the ambient air temperature on Dietla is, if anything, higher than usual.
Interesting theory there, Josh.
So, yeah, the city's trying to convince everybody to use public transportation by shutting it all down most of the year. And the stuff that is running doesn't run on any schedule that you can understand or know where it's going.
Yeah, as always, it'll be great when it's finished, but yeah, I mean...
Then they have to start fixing stuff that breaks as soon as they finish building the new stuff.
Well, speaking of public transport, or transport anyway, Dave, of a very different and much, much faster and more expensive type, tell us about Hyperloop.
Well, this is an extravagant plan by this Hyperloop Poland company. What they're proposing to do is not to build purpose-built Hyperloop lines, is to slowly upgrade the existing rail network one step at a time. And the first step in maglev, which won't be cheap. And, maglev itself is going to be tricky to do, unless, because doesn't the Japanese, like the high speeds really can rely on the long straight runs that were built into the system from the start. But maglev is cool, and then they're going to try and cap it with the dome over it, to create a vacuum, and then later they'll run maglev in a vacuum. That will increase the speed somewhat, and then they will try and put the actual pods in, the super fancy spaceshipy things we see in the newspapers at the moment. Look, Hyperloop technology is so new. These companies are all getting started. It's exciting. It's more exciting to me than phones and apps and stuff like that. So I'm always have a bit of a soft spot for any kind of heavy engineering project that could be in a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, exactly. Sci-fi movie, kind of like
Go for
lofty
it, lads.
buildings with kind of pod-shaped things skimming through the air with
And I thought it was
happy people at
That
high
was
speed.
very interesting what you were saying about the death of experience now in the nuclear industry. So even if we wanted to ramp it up on last week's show, we'd be hamstrung that way anyway. And I just think that's kind of representative of a broader trend of a lot of great minds going into finance and Silicon Valley, where maybe the emphasis has been on the really clever stuff, but maybe not the kind of large scale, government-backed, huge investment, projects like,
Well, you make an interesting point because
where's our new Concorde, man? Where are we going to Mars?
I was first aware of maglev and the idea of the linear motor in around 1970. And I don't think it was a brand new discovery then, but it was one that was seen as having, great potential. I mean, I don't know if you know kind of more or less how it works, but
Take us through, Josh.
a traditional electric motor is that you have kind of magnetic coils that kind of, when you feed them an alternating current, they rotate around a central bearing. And this guy, I think his name was Eric Lathwaite, had this brilliant idea of, instead of having the coils rotating around a bearing, why not have a coil moving in a straight line? It's the same thing in theory, except instead of a motor encased within a case and driving some wheels, you actually make the track the bearing, and the coils are the container, which is then like a rower carriage or something. And because of the magnetic forces, you actually it's slightly repelled, so it hovers just above the line, and it's as long as you've got power there, it will move. And
friction, easier.
Well, zero friction apart from the air. Yeah,
Dr. Mike?
What the Polish startup company is talking about, I think they're called Hyperloop, is they want to...
Very original name.
Yeah.
Where do they get that name from?
Basically, it's the easiest way to get money from other, investors if they know right away what's going on. What they want to suggest to do is to build on the current infrastructure, a hybrid structure allowing normal trains to ride, but on top of that, or on the same lines, you would have what they're calling a passive maglev system. So as the train builds up more speed, it will start to hover, electromagnetism moving through the field, and then you get another magnetic field that will push it up. And they're saying that, this technology, if everything goes right, the regulatory stuff, they could have it going in 7-10 years. And if they start to earn enough money, then they could, switch to vacuum trains, which have been an idea since the beginning of the freaking 20th century.
Josh, you mentioned
a cool idea.
You mentioned sci-fi movies. Okay, let me give you two visions of the future. You tell me which one is closer to the Hyperloop thing. Okay, you remember those sci-fi movies from the 60s, 1960s? They would say the year is 1994. Everyone has their own private spaceship. That kind of, it's a joke. They're ridiculously optimistic. On the other hand, remember in the early 1980s, I think maybe late 1970s, somebody at IBM said, we're only going to make like a few hundred of these a year. And, nobody's ever going to need their own computer. That's ridiculous. And they were wrong too. That's the other.
You never know, John.
That's the other extreme. Which one fits the Hyperloop situation?
Well, I think that's very, that's a great question, and it's something that science fiction authors have, in many cases consistently got wrong, decade after decade, and a handful have got rather more right. And of course, as in everything with human endeavor, it's market driven. If there's something that is patently useful, and particularly if it's useful for an individual, then an individual will go out of their way to try and get it. If it's something that's rare and expensive, then only the richest individuals can do it. But if there's a need and a demand for it, then the production will increase and the price will drop. And so we have, portable computers that we can talk to people, and take pictures. And
they run out of battery very quick.
They do run out of batteries very quickly.
But the funny thing is, we have technology right now that's supposed to bring us together, and so we can communicate at vast distances, so people can work from home remotely. But then we're also investing in infrastructure to allow us to get from city to city very quickly. So which one? Are we supposed to be moving around all the time, or can we stay home?
Well, it'd be nice to have the option to do both, Mike. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Speaking of market prices, Josh, the government this week, Dave, decided that market prices don't apply to electricity.
Yeah, the freeze in electricity prices, another classic vote-winning strategy, I would say. Nothing really else to say about that, apart from it's going to be reasonably expensive. And again, watch the VAT rises on your cigarettes and alcohol, people, because it's got to come from somewhere. Yeah,
well, price fixing has never gone wrong anywhere whatsoever. And when people say like, the government's going to help you save money by making sure the prices don't go higher.
Scam!
That just means your tax dollars are being used to pay for something instead of something else you might want the government to help support.
Okay, so wait a second. In a different context, price limits would be expected to result in a shortage of that good because the producers wouldn't make it if the price is not high enough to justify the production. Does that apply to things like electricity? And also, don't forget,
energy prices set to rise in Poland next year.
and also, don't forget the government I don't know the number, but the government owns a substantial portion of the energy sector here. So aren't they putting a cap on their own income?
Well, actually, what's going on right now is the main reason the prices are going up is because of all the carbon taxes and cap and trade and all those kind of things bringing in these extra costs. And the government basically says, no, the end users and businesses won't have to pay for these increases. We will, in the sense that the government is subsidizing this. So the costs are going up. It's just the differences are the government says after this certain point, we're paying the rest, or the taxpayers paying the rest. So we're all sharing the burden instead of just seeing it on our bills.
So Dave, you see this as cheap electioneering, just vote getting?
Yeah.
Aren't they doing this a little bit early? Elections in 4 months.
Well, they're freezing it for a whole year, so they can keep banging on about it right up to election day, can't they?
Okay.
I mean, look, you can spend your budget however you like. I'm not saying it's a horrifically mad policy or anything. Energy price freezes are reasonably common, in certain countries.
Well, to be honest, I mean, if we had a decent kind of like open market in energy supply, then it wouldn't be necessary to have, price freezes, because actually the price would go down because there are cheaper and more efficient ways of generating electricity that are not necessarily permitted currently.
There is
Free market
science as well. Food price inflation is up quite sharply in the last quarter and set to keep rising as well. That could be to do with the expanded growth and spending in the economy and wage rises.
This is why I'm telling you, people, we have to hoard food and water and just wait it out.
Josh does, because Brexit's coming and he's going to his camp.
Yeah. You won't be seeing me for some time. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the big story that's blowing up on social media. This is one of those things where you're either on one side of the fence or the other, apparently. And on top of that, as if that weren't enough, it involves everybody's favorite mega store in Poland, IKEA. What's going on with IKEA, guys?
I'm kind of like, I was trying to get to grips with this story before we started. I read IKEA's statement, I read the article. Unfortunately, there's no direct quote of what the guy said. He commented on an internal article on IKEA's intranet, and basically what they're saying is he kind of insulted somebody using, his religious views as a way of excluding, is the term they kept using in the statement. And, it's hard to tell. The words are, quite precise. I would like to actually see what the guy said before.
Yeah, what did he do? Give us the bottom line for anybody listening who doesn't know.
It seems he was, had an issue with their LGBT rights day. They were having a celebration of LGBT rights, which...
he objected.
Yeah, which would be reasonably common in any global corporation activities like that around the month. It's Gay Pride Month,
and
right?
IKEA reacted by...
Firing him. Yeah, but we don't know what he said. And I'll tell you something, John, you know as well as I do. Yeah, I have this picture in my mind of this guy that he's possibly a bit of a troll. I mean, you go on the internal company site and you start posting comments like that. You can expect trouble. It's not like he was on Facebook, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm totally anti-censorship and, in general, support anyone's freedom and right to have an opinion, but I'm questioning the guy's intelligence in doing it in the first place. What do you think about that?
Maybe he was looking to pick a fight, maybe? Is that what
I kind of just, when you're at work, you're supposed to have your head down working. All right, so, maybe you have an issue with the LGBT rights day, but, if you're going to stand and die on that mountain, you best be prepared.
Okay, but that leads, maybe keep your head down, just go to work and never mind. But that is what leads to situations where people feel that they're forced to conform to maybe a social agenda or political agenda that they don't agree with. So that's where the issue of corporate liberalism comes in, individual rights in the workplace. You're
never made to participate in any event.
It's a complicated issue.
Just an article.
Well, there are issues where the thing is, we don't really know the details are about this, because it's something about him quoting
which by the way doesn't stop us from talking about it.
Absolutely not.
I think we've been clear though that we don't have all the information. It does make me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah,
I would like to see what the guy actually said.
Dynamically evolving as we speak.
It's basically gone to the point that every company now is changed its logo to a rainbow flag. So it's just whatever. It's become just another little corporate ad campaign gimmick.
Mikey, didn't Google have a similar big controversy about this? An employee
James Damore, yeah.
So this
fight the power.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is a thing, isn't it? I mean, it seems
people on both sides see an opportunity to kind of raise
government jump straight on this. Joe, bro, is straight on this. This is a disgrace. This is a...
But this whole issue with IKEA ties in nicely with a high court decision just came in last week as well. Just like in the US, in Poland, there was also a situation where a printer press owner decided not to print these placards or posters for an LGBT event. And they took him to court. He lost the first round of court. He lost in the appeals court. Went to the highest court, and it was finally upheld that he had a right as a business not to print documentation that supports something that he doesn't agree on a religious level. So a lot
He
of
has the right to refuse their order.
this kind of goes to like the whole situation in the U.S. they had with the baking the cakes for a gay marriage. So
That's what I mean. He grabbed it straight away, Joe Bro, as political meat. You know, I mean, he was off and running like he couldn't help himself. I don't like his face.
So are you equating those, Dr. Micah? Because on the one hand, the court says, okay, the guy has the right to refuse their business based on his religious beliefs, and then with IKEA, do they have the right then to fire somebody? I see one involving employment law, labor law.
Yeah, I doubt IKEA did it without checking the regulations. You know, they've the statement's really clear. They say that he was deliberately excluding or kind of marginalising this specific person. So that's the way they.
So more like workplace harassment rather than a gay rights issue. Let's say.
Yes.
No, I'm curious to see where this goes, but in every sense, I'm the kind of person who's just sick of these issues to begin with, and I think there's sometimes too much of a, look at the left hand over here, where the right hand you don't know what is doing. It's like, it's an issue, yeah, but, in the media it's shown as, being the leading front page issue, and then other stuff that's going on that's also important is forgotten about.
Well, it's just one of those tailor-made things now, like we talked about before. We talked about the boar call a few months ago. And remember the banana protest? There's always something where both sides of the political divide are ready to go, to raise their flag and go to war and frame it in terms of how they're being victimized or they're right and the other side's wrong.
We're gearing up for election season, so it's,
we can look forward to more of this.
Bases riled up, yeah.
We can look forward to more of this. Dave, we were before we started recording, we were talking about the utter fantasy of any real boycott taking place against IKEA in this country. Not going to happen.
Poles got to get their hot dogs somewhere.
Meatballs.
There's a strong affinity for good value.
I think IKEA could come out with a PR campaign that said "fuck you, Poland," and it would make zero difference in the traffic.
Hot dogs rainbow colored, people still eat them.
They wouldn't care. They would still go. This country is obsessed with IKEA.
Yeah, it's a whole day out. Cheap meat.
You can go to anyone's apartment here and to their kitchen.
I was going to say, you cast
especially.
your eyes around the expanses of KrakCast Tower Studios.
There's a few things here too.
Do you know what though? A
IKEA.
meatball with gravy, chips, a little piece of chocolate, dime pie, and a coffee afterwards, all for the price of a sandwich. You can't work it.
Now, my favorite part is seeing the people who think they're losing money by not buying the one Zwadi hot dogs. Like they have to get like 15 of them in their hands as they walk out the door.
You mean that's you, isn't it, John?
That's okay. I get like 12 or 10 or 12.
I think the way IKEA is kind of designed, which is like basically put you on the start of a maze and you're a mice and you have to work your way through all the way to the end, or else track back on yourself and go all the way back around through, which is kind of a human rights violation.
Well, no, I think this is one of the first things you do when you establish yourself in a new town, is you go to the IKEA and you find all the shortcuts so that you don't have to go, because you will be visiting several times. You might as well learn them as quickly as possible.
It is hell to negotiate in IKEA.
Come on,
on a Saturday.
Yes.
Well, that's rule number one. Never go on a Saturday.
Dr. Mike, what did people in this country do for furniture before IKEA opened?
We know what that looked like.
They basically just sent in, a form to the government asking them to send them in, another form to fill out because they wanted to request, the right to order some kind of furniture that they'll get, 12 years later.
They went to Calvaria, the land of carpenters.
The whatever business it is, whoever's second on that list in terms of furniture sales, it is a very distant second place.
Red, white, and black, which is dreadful stuff.
There's also VTech just outside Krakow.
There's Agata Furniture, which is fine, decent enough, but nobody holds a candle to IKEA when it comes to furniture and home furnishings and everything. Everybody buys the same stuff there in the whole country.
We are not sponsored by IKEA, it looks.
Not yet. We could be if you're listening.
Even though all our asses are being supported by them.
All right, guys, one more thing we got to mention before we get out of here today.
Do we have to? I'm soaked in sweat. Come on.
Yeah, well, it's hot in here as usual. Krakow Zoo celebrating 90 years of being, the Krakow Zoo.
Who cares? Goodbye.
Yeah. They started off with some pheasants and goats.
Dave, when was the last time you were at the zoo?
Charlie was there last week. I was just after my surgery. It was about 10 days ago, and he couldn't, so I couldn't go. But he had a great time.
Nice day out. Huh?
Yeah. And before he went, I kept saying to him, "They don't have any giraffes, Charlie. They don't have any giraffes." So when he got there and he saw the giraffes, he was absolutely delighted.
Why did you tell him that?
So when he saw the giraffe, he'd be even more excited because he wasn't expecting a giraffe.
Something with even more neck than his dad.
Yeah.
Oh. You were lowering his expectations to make him more excited when he saw the giraffes?
Yeah. I was naming all the animals that they had there, and I was like, but
Oh, and by the way,
giraffes, you know.
going back to IKEA, you think IKEA is bad on a Saturday? Go to the zoo on a Saturday in the summertime when the weather is nice. It's an absolute, well, it's a zoo.
It's literally, it's literally an expression, John. It's like
horrible.
a zoo.
It's like a zoo. I made the mistake of going there a couple of years back on a Saturday.
It's such a bundle of joy. It's such a bundle of joy. Describe your trip to the zoo.
It was a nightmare.
With your beautiful children and wife there, John.
Dr. Mike is right. No one-swatty hot dogs.
I haven't been to a zoo since childhood, and the thing that I remember vividly from, I think it was Bristol Zoo, was when you get to the bit where all the kind of the big cats are, the tigers and cheetahs and panthers, and the stink. These, my God, I mean, I don't know. You can talk about
animals have been known to shit on the floor.
Dublin Zoo is really cool. It's in the Phoenix Park, the largest wild park in Europe. And I was there recently, and more than once I heard it exclaim, as people got to where the old polar bear pit used to be, and we're like, yeah, they don't have them anymore. Not allowed to have the polar bears anymore. It's cruel.
So what do they have left?
Well, they have a big pit that used to be for the polar bears, and now there's just some,
It's called come and see the empty boat.
Well,
polar bear
if
pit.
it's cool to have polar bears, is it cool to have other animals too, or they do have animals?
I think you've opened up a valid line of debate, John.
There's a lot of people arguing about this right now. It's like, do zoos help educate and conserve animals, or are they just freak
the whole
shows?
what's it called, the blackfish thing, SeaWorld and whatnot.
Kids love them though. You can
at
get
the
ice cream
Krakow
there.
Zoo, the only problem I have was with the cages for the big cats are shameful, absolutely shameful. Although a couple of the big cats have new cages.
They're expanding it. Yeah.
And the monkey cages were also a little bit on the small side as well. But this is changing. But for the longest time, the cages for the big cats were maybe like 4 meters wide by 6 meters deep. It was just absolutely horrible. But I think lions and tigers have their own cage now. Anybody want to jump in here?
I've never been
nobody
to
knows.
a zoo, so I don't know.
I have been. It's decent. It's like it was a good few years ago. It's right up to the top of that big hill. It's in a forest. It's beautiful. It's very nice, but it's not as nice as Dublin Zoo. Nowhere near as nice.
Okay.
Excuse me, Krakowians.
So get a plug for the Dublin Zoo in there. Thanks, Dave.
Dublin Zoo's a great day, yo.
Well, that's the news for this week, guys. Thanks for listening. Hey, don't forget, a little later this week, in 2 or 3 days, we're going to publish an episode, an interview with Robert Desmond, who was the inspiration behind the Ride for the Living, which just took place last week. So make sure to check that out. Give us a like on Facebook, share us, all the usual stuff, and we'll see you next time on the news.
Hey, John, I just wanted to interject here right at the end.
Too late.
Damn.
Bye.